All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Moneyball, Lafayette's Influence on Sports. I am Ian Stone. I'm the class of 2010 and the president of the Chicago Area Alumni Chapter. So the Lafayette Chicago Chapter and the Office of Alumni Relations appreciates you taking the time out of your busy professional and personal lives to connect with Lafayette tonight. Before I introduce our panel, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, please know that we have utilized the audience mute feature in order to ensure that the presentation is not interrupted by any background noise. We invite you to include your full name and class year on your profile as well. We also suggest you turn your video off to avoid being on camera in the gallery during the presentation. We welcome any questions and ask that you use the chat feature located at the bottom of your screen to type in any questions that you may have. I'll be looking at the chat periodically and toss out some of those questions either during our panelists' presentations or at the question and answer session that we'll have at the end. Please know that this presentation will be recorded so that you and the rest of Lafayette community will have access to it later. So now I'd like to introduce our panel. We have Wataru Ando, class of 18, baseball operations analyst for the Chicago Whitesox. We have Gregory Bernstein, class of 2012, performance data scientist for ConnectEd. And Corey Ruff, 2009, VP of business analytics for the Chicago Bears. We're going to start first with Wataru. This is very exciting. All right, Wataru. So can you just tell us a brief overview of what it is that you do?
Hi, I'm Wataru. I'm one of the 3 baseball operations analysts for the Chicago Whitesox. So I'll say that my main job is broken up into 3 different parts. And the first part is like the draft season. So that's right now. So a lot of my responsibilities right now, it's to compile all the data so that the senior director of baseball operations, the scouting directors, and the people who mainly make the decisions in terms of the draft to get all the data that they need to make their decisions. And at the same time, for me, I look at players who could be overlooked because they play in a minor conference that the scouts have not been able to see. So I look at players where maybe we can pick up in the later rounds that might have some interesting, arsenal and strengths that could have been overlooked by just because the scouts weren't able to go see them. And the second phase, I would say, is right after the season ends. So that's when we decide like what our team's needs are for the next season. So whether it could be like starting pitching or it could be like outfield or infield. So that's when we decide like what kind of players we need, and then from there we pinpoint players who we like from the analytical standpoint, and then make our presentation to the general manager and the players the executives who make the decisions on that. And then for the most part of the season, so right now, kind of as well as during the off season after the draft frenzy, it's a lot of the research and development that's everything from using StatCast data to create new metrics, as well as like maintaining all these databases so that like it's up to speed with what the MLB provides to us is what I usually do as my part of the job.
To make a really bad baseball pun, how much influence do your pitches have on like the decisions that are made for the players?
So I think in terms of for the free agency aspect, I think last season we had like a list of like 10 players for each of the positions we needed, and I think for each of the 3 position and the players like we recommended in terms of like this position we like these guys, I think all of them were in that list. So it's pretty cool to see that like some of the things that like we wrote up and we thought of was being utilized.
That's awesome. So what's the favorite part of your day, favorite part of your job?
So I think right now, my favorite part of the day or my favorite part of the job right now is going to the ballpark every game. So we have an office in the 400 level. So every home game I go there like right before the game and then watch the game. Well, I also get to like interact with my boss, and like sometimes the the other executives come, so we get to talk about baseball as well. So that's a really cool part of the job.
That's awesome. Did any experience at Lafayette that you had at Lafayette put you on your path to your current position?
Yes. So I think the biggest thing that helped me was doing the college thesis. So my senior year, I did a college thesis with Professor Evan Fisher in the mathematics department, and I think that experience allowed me to get a feel of like what goes into research, and also the, I guess, the more concrete or the tangible skills of like coding, as well as understanding the like the statistical analysis part. So I think all that really helped and I guess bolstering my resume to be where I am right now.
And how did your time at Lafayette like continue to mold that expertise?
I think one of my favorite things about the mathematics department is the math lounge that we had at Lafayette, and that's where like we do our homework, as well as also we talk about math and like just throw out ideas, and sometimes like we solve problems there that like we just come up with, and like that's the kind of like the environment that I really thrive on, and I think it's really similar to what we have in our analytics department. So I think that experience was really helpful.
And speaking of math, I wanted to go to a question that I got in the chat. How much of the X stats go into drafting or signing of a player?
Oh, can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. How much of the X stats go into drafting or signing of a player?
Oh, so like expected numbers.
Yeah.
I think in terms of the draft, in terms of like expected stats, in terms of the draft, it's really hard because like one player could be really, really, really good, but they play in not the most strongest conferences of all time. But other players can do much better, and like a medium player in like a really tough conference might not look as good in terms of the expected stats, but in reality they could be much better. So it's really hard to tell from that aspect, but we look more at like the raw numbers, so like spin rates, velocities, as well as like how often these guys get swings and misses on like a specific pitch. And so those aspects are more important in terms of the evaluating players, especially at that level.
Have you met any White Sox players of note?
Yes. So last season, during the spring training, before the pandemic hit, I was able to go to the Arizona camp for a couple days and we got to do a tour of the facility. And while I was there, we were doing the tour, and then Tim Anderson walks by, and so my dad goes and opened up the door for him. So that was a pretty cool interaction. And then while we were sitting at so there's a dining section at the facility, and while we're eating, there's these three giant men just walk by, and I look up, and it's Jose Abreu, the last year's MVP, and Eloy Jimenez, our superstar left fielder who's now injured, and also Luis Robert, who's our other superstar outfielder who's also injured. So it was pretty cool to see those guys like up close and not wearing uniforms too.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. A different view than a lot of fans get to see as well.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How long until a World Series win, Wataru? How long we got to wait?
I think it's really hard to pinpoint on like when we will win a World Series, because the playoffs are such a random thing. Like, but I think the window to contend is right now. Like, we have the best record in American League I think as of today, and I think we have the best run differential, which is like a good indicator of how well we're doing. So hopefully sometime soon, and hopefully, yeah, if everyone stays healthy, I think we have a solid chance that we could go pretty deep into playoffs.
Could you remind everyone what your major was at Lafayette?
Yes. So my major was mathematics.
Awesome. And do you collect any data or look at like the biomechanics or motion capture within the White Sox organization? Does that go into any of the data that you're capturing and utilizing?
So yes, but we in our Arizona facility, we have like a lot of the motion capture things that we use during the spring training to like make sure everyone's like form is correct. And that is usually run by the player development side, and especially with like biomechanics, which I'm not really I guess proficient on. So that's more done by the biomechanical engineers.
Okay. And toss this one out here. What are your thoughts on swinging 3-0 when your team is big? Thanks for that one.
Yeah, I think so. I played in club baseball, and Professor Notaro was the manager there. But I think for me, I'm not really that big a risk taker. I'm not gonna hit a home run. So for me, I'm not gonna be swinging at 3-0. But I think for players like Yerman, I think it's fine. It's like their salary is based on their performance, especially in their rookie contracts and while they're in arbitration. So I think if you got to do what you got to do to make money. So
right, the window is so small, right? For these professional athletes, you kind of got to play for your stats.
Yes, and especially for him, he's 28. He's not going to hit free agency until he's like 33, which isn't great, especially as a DH bat. So he has to make as much money as possible when he's young.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Wataru. That was fantastic. I got some more questions that are coming in that we might get to in our Q&A session as well for all of our panelists. But next up, I want to introduce Greg Bernstein, and he has a little presentation that he is going to share and show us. And I might cut in to clarify some stuff, Greg, as you go. So all yours.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, cut me off anytime, obviously. And I will introduce you guys a little bit to what I do and my profession. So if I can get this to share. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, so thanks, Ian. Oh. Not go too far. All right. Yes, I am Greg. I was a English and Econ major at Lafayette, graduating 2012. You can see a little visual of my personal journey to get there right here. So I started in New York and moved to London at a young age, which gave me some exposure to some pretty big sports markets in different areas, as you can imagine, from early on. So it's always been an interest of mine. Made my way over to Lafayette, and after a few stops in Philadelphia and along the eastern seaboard, I made my way out to Chicago, where I took the Masters of Science in Analytics class, Masters, I should say, at the University of Chicago, which I graduated from in 2019. And so I'm still in Chicago today, working as a performance data scientist for ConnectEd. I do have a little fake stop here that I had to include because I'm happy to join you guys from Pittsburgh this evening. I certainly still live in Chicago, but we're happy to be here to celebrate the wedding of Colin Sadie, class of 2012, and Laura Kleiber, class of 2014. So I always like to share a Lafayette success story with his fellow alumni. So that brings me here this evening when I'm talking to you guys. So when I got to the University of Chicago and I started pursuing an analytics degree, I kind of had a natural merging of two interests where I was studying statistics and numbers and I enjoyed it. And of course, sports had always been an interest of mine. So naturally thinking about getting into sports analytics was kind of just came together naturally for me. And when I thought about sports analytics, what did I think about, right? For me, my whole life, I'd always thought about it in one way, which was, for lack of a better word, the Moneyball approach, right? I'd read Moneyball when I was a high schooler, like the book. We saw the movie. So here's Brad Pitt, Oscar nominated, given the kind of telling the old school guys how to do it. Bill James's formula here. A lot of the stuff Wataru just talked about. But what I didn't realize is there's actually several other branches of sports analytics. And that's what I would come to discover as I pursued my degree and learned a little bit more about the industry. So what everything I kind of thought and that I thought encapsulated sports analytics is really what I've called here statistical analytics or on-field performance-based analytics. What I came to learn is there's several other branches of sports analytics as well, certainly. There's the performance analytics branch. And when I say performance, I don't mean on-field statistical performance or success. I mean actual human, biometric, biological performance, which is what I'm involved in. I'm going to talk about a little bit today. I know there's also a whole nother ring, right, where you get into fan engagement, marketing analytics, the business side that Corey is a lot more well-versed in. you could probably contain this in one branch or do several. But this is how my eyes were opened. And in that performance analytics vein, I ended up latching on with a company, ConnectEd. So ConnectEd is a German-based company. We're headquartered here in Chicago, and we have a larger team based over in Munich. We have a smaller team here in the States who came over to get involved in the sports market with tracking technology. So here you can see this example of our sensor, which would be worn in this case in the back or could be on the waist. And this is a tracking device that captures the movement of the athlete and records where he is positionally at all times. Now, there's actually a lot of interesting ways you can go about the tracking problem. There's a lot of different solutions based on different sports. That's kind of a whole nother discussion, but our primary product here physically tracks the position of the athletes. And what we do is we work with a lot of sports teams across professional leagues. Predominantly, our most business is with the NBA, and teams use our tracking system in practice. So they're able to record the movement and metrics of their athletes across all of practice. And we also have that information from the game. So what we're able to build out here is you can see a little example in the bottom right here is essentially our whole box score or database or whatever you want to call it, but not of game statistics and points and rebounds and whatever sport you're playing, but of actual motion related data, right? Biomechanics. So we have distance, we have speed of the athlete, we have the mechanical load, a representation of internal external load. We can divide that into lower end activity, higher end activity. And that's really where my job comes in, is we have this data connected between the practice and the game. And I'm on board doing a lot of different things, but analyzing that, putting that picture together, trying to create that consistent timeline of player movement for the athletes and the teams. More recently this year, we've had a bit of a pivot in our company. Not that this isn't our primary business still, but we produced a product known as Safe Zone, which was purely a contact tracing product. So if you actually heard of the name ConnectEd, it's most likely because of that. We had deals with the NFL, NBA, and March Madness, just to name a few, where they were using our sensor, but it was being used purely for a proximity to another sensor standpoint for contact tracing. So it wasn't that everybody's positions were being recorded, allowing us to calculate things like distance and speed, etc. But it was just how close are you to other people wearing the sensor? And if there was a positive test or some kind of outbreak occurring, we were able to go back and look at the contact tracing. And it's pretty exciting that our technology was able to, be used, I think, first by the NBA in the bubble, going back a full season now. I know it helped the NFL complete a full season. It helped March Madness get underway. So that was a big kind of pivot this year that we explored. Okay, so sports, when you come down to it, is a business like any other, right? And aside from making money, which is the objective of every business, there's usually another objective, which usually lends to that making of the money. And in sports, I think it's pretty clear the objective for most teams is to win, right? It's both profitable, and of course, there's this whole other emotional fan base, intrinsic value to that. But suffice to say, the business of sports and the teams we're working with, our clients, is they want to win. So as I said, we work a lot in the NBA. So if I started to make a list of, reasons why teams might win a basketball game, the distance, the exact distance you cover, the speed you go would probably be somewhat far down that list, right? You'd probably start with having Michael Jordan or LeBron James on your team, and then we'd work your way down to a couple different other reasons. So the question becomes, right, how can we help, right? How can our product, measuring the movement and motion of athletes, how can we influence winning, right? Because that's what we're here to do. So I think before we answer that, it takes a slight kind of shift in thinking, and which is that when we all watch sports, we observe a game and we see a team win and lose. And that's how we observe in our experience. But in reality, that's not exactly what's happening, right? What's happening is that there are two teams that are matched, and there's probably some expected differential between the teams, right? Some average outcome we would expect. And more often than not, that's the outcome we'll realize. But sometimes we'll see the team that's favored overperform, and sometimes we'll see the team that's not favored, they'll overperform, which is why we get upsets, right? So if it was just about two teams, we would never have upsets, which makes sports exciting. So the question becomes, when we look at what we're doing with this performance data is, how can we increase the probability of the teams working for winning? How can we increase that probability? And a brief example, I like to give a mini statistics lecture now, which I always enjoy, right? Let's say we have Lafayette playing Lehigh here. Okay, so going into that game, we would have some kind of expected margin for the outcome. So on average, we expect Lafayette to win that game by about 25 points. On a good day, we'll maybe get them by 30 or 40. But maybe if, I don't know, the electricity goes out and the windstorm blows in and something crazy happens, maybe they could find a way to win a game by 1 point. So the way I approach kind of my work is I'm thinking, there's so much out of my control, right? The players are playing, if they're going to have a good day, a bad day, there's strategy, there's coaching, right? There's so much I'm not affecting. That's out of my control, right? What I'm just thinking is here's the distribution of how I would expect the game to go. How can I take my performance analytics and just move that 2 or 3 points in our direction, right? And so instead of having the expected outcome be, 3 or 5 points in our favor, make that 6 or 8 points. So that if, the guys are a little off, if they're 20% off on a given day, that results in us still winning the game by 2 points rather than losing the game by 2 points. And I think there's so many facets of sports these days, right? There's so much that goes into it. We have, even on this call, right, 3 different people just from Lafayette here doing 3 very different things with analytics, players. So I think all we're trying to do is just gain that little bit of an edge in our direction with everything that we're doing, and that's the goal. So to get a little more specific, how do we do that, right? Specifically, how do we use performance data to increase our probability of winning? So I think the first thing our technology is specifically great for is defining the demands of the game. So what I mean by that is, what does it mean to train for an NBA game? What if, NFL game, soccer match, right? That training, that physical experience on the body is very different. So if you told me I had to train for a 3-mile race, that's a little clearer. I kind of know exactly what that entails, but what does it entail to play an NBA game? You need, technology and ideally the most accurate tracking technology possible to answer that question. And then you add another layer, which is, well, is that the same for every player, right? And the answer is unequivocally no. I think we can just tell by watching sports, we can see players moving differently, performing differently. So just defining the demands of the game. And what that'll lead us to is what we like to think about as load preparation, right? So there's a lot of talk these days about load management. And the way we like to think about load management is that load management is equivalent to preparing for those loads, right? Have players as prepared as possible to handle the loads we expect from them in their games. At the end of the day, what do fans want, right? We want to see the best players playing as much as possible under their optimal conditions. So, we think about load preparation as, not necessarily managing the guys, but okay, are you prepared to play as hard as you have to when it matters most in the most important games? And if we do prepare for that load, we're going to lead to what I see as really the first primary use of our system, which is injury prevention and efficient return to play. So if you're prepared for the demands of the games, less injury. Also, if we can define the game accurately, what happens when you get injured is we can say, okay, you have a 3-month rehab program, and this is where you need to be. We can quantify exactly how you have to perform to come back into an NBA or whatever professional game, and we can build you up to that also using the tracking technology. So of course, less games lost to injury, better players playing, more winning. That's what we're here for.
Greg, I wanted to cut in and say, because of this technology is utilized during practices, how well do you see it translating to like real games and real game data and stuff like that? Because, there's always the getting in the zone and adrenaline pumping and stuff like that. Do you see it translating well?
Yeah, that's a great. So, the data is consistent as in what we're measuring. I think think what you're subtly calling into question there is effort, quite frankly, right? Is somebody going to approach a practice with the same intensity as the game? And then that's something that would show up in the data, right? At the end of the day, you kind of get into a whole nother realm where, once the season really gets rolling, how should we best use practice, right? So, and that's where it really becomes to monitor the game, because if a guy has 3 hard games in a week, he doesn't need to be pushed in practice. He doesn't need to prepare for the, if he has, some time off and he's not getting as many minutes, maybe we use that training time to replicate the game and keep him on that trajectory.
Sounds like you just made a fan of Allen Iverson. Let's get back to your presentation there. Thank you.
For sure. We'll wrap it up in a slide or two here. I just want to cover this last one, and this is just more open-ended. So I'll put it out into the community here. But yeah, searching for fatigue, right? We have load preparation and injury prevention as one use case, and then preventing fatigue kind of as another, right? So when you are out on the court, are you performing under optimal conditions? If you're not exhausted, you're making better decisions, you're executing better, more winning. Identifying fatigue is very tricky, right? We have to think about what measurement outcomes we can use here. 2 kind of quick examples. Let's say a player's speed and acceleration decreases throughout the game. Is the player fatigued necessarily, or was there a change in the style of play? Did the game become a blowout and there wasn't a need to perform at such an exerting level, right? So how do we tease that apart? Think about the flip side, okay? A player's speed and acceleration are steady throughout the game. We look at his metrics. He's good. He's in shape. But did he have the same performance capacity while he was completing those speeds and those accelerations, right? So I can go out and run a mile, and then I can run a second mile back to back, and I can go the same speed. But if you ask me to kick a soccer ball the second time I'm running, I'm not going to do it as well as the first time. I'm going to be tired. So this is a long and winding road, essentially, where I just see lots of potential for combining. There's so many data sources, right? The statistical, external load metrics, internal load metrics, biomechanics came up when Wataru was speaking. I hadn't even thought about that. That's a whole nother thing, right, that we could get. And so this is a question with an imperfect answer, but suffice to say, as we get technology improves, and we continue to build, we'll be able to put more and more together, and ideally train athletes properly so they're in their optimal states while they're on the court. Cool. So I'll just wrap it up with a thanks to Lafayette College, which is why we're here, of course. One of the main questions that Ian and I were talking about is how Lafayette helped you on this path, right? And it's not as direct a path for me because I didn't study exactly the day-to-day technical statistical models I'm using now at Lafayette. But I don't see that as super significant because, and I'm going to steal Ian's phrase here, so full credit to him, but transferable skills is definitely something I feel like I gained from Lafayette, and the kind of the encouragement to pursue areas of interest, right? So this path is has not been linear for me, but and even getting to U Chicago, right, where I wasn't going there to do sports analytics. I was going there because I was interested in statistics and math, and I was interested in sports. And so just Lafayette kind of teaching me to pursue those areas of interest, I greatly appreciate. And I think the other thing is just the strong sense of community that Lafayette provides, which is why I'm so happy to be here talking to a group of alumni. I think when you meet fellow pards, there's an immediate connection. And in addition to, having such a strong network base, I have several lifelong friends from Lafayette. I'm very excited after a COVID delay of a year here to marry my fiance, Dr. Ariel Aguiar, class of 2012 as well, another Lafayette success story. And I'm very proud of my cousin, Molly LaPointe, who's going to be a newly minted alumni in about 10 days with the class of 2021. So I share all that because I think I'm not the only one, right? Where Lafayette is inside in our community. And so it's great to be able to talk to you today and hopefully again soon. So thanks for the time.
Yeah, Greg, thanks. And before you leave, okay, I don't want you to take any offense to this, but with all of the data that you've combined and the statistics you're able to provide the teams and the players' data and whatnot, how do you know? Is there a metric that measures like the difference you made? You know, like I know Wataru, they got the wins above replacement, right? The WAR average, right? Is there a metrics that allows you to like decide and determine if that data was helpful and useful?
I'll answer that question on July 22nd after Game 7 of the NBA Finals, and let's see which team wins. It's a great question. I mean, off it, short answer is the best way to measure this outcome in the long term, I believe, would be in games saved through injury, right? Number of games saved through injury and success rate of return to play. And players able to return. And at the end of the day, you do have to probably measure it with some kind of statistical measure of their on-court performance, because that's what's important, right? Scoring goals, putting the ball in the basket. There's a lot of factors that go into that, but I think in the long run, and this is what I was getting to on my last slide with fatigue, but injury data is another source of data we will continue to accumulate and merge in and put these pieces together. So I think in the long run, hopefully we'll see from this technology, longer careers and games saved through injury.
Yeah, and it seems almost as if, as well, as you start to build over a course of seasons, how different it is for teams that are using this technology versus teams that aren't, in terms of those areas where you're most concentrated in terms of injury prevention and return to play and things like that. Thank you very much, Greg. I really appreciate it. We might have some more questions for you as we come into, the question and answer at the end there. But last up, I wanted to have Corey Ruff, VP Business Analytics from the Chicago Bears, wrap us up here with, nice little talk, right? So Corey, first off, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us what you do for the Bears.
Sure. Hey guys, thanks for having me. So I am VP of Analytics for the Bears on the business side. So I oversee two departments. I oversee our strategy team and our business analytics team. That's sort of like Moneyball, but on the business side. So instead of trying to find wins, you're trying to find extra dollars. Which I guess would be my equation for that. I report into our CFO. We operate like a hub and spoke model. So we sort of sit at the center and we service all of our external direct revenue generating departments, like ticket sales or sponsorship or suites, or our indirect revenue channels, somewhat like marketing. So we try to really just enhance their efforts and make them more efficient, whether it's ad dollars that we're spending or trying to maximize our reach on things like that. So I don't have anything really to do on the football side, so I can't speak to that. But we are very much like a family. It's the oldest franchise in the NFL, the original founding franchise. So it's family owned and operated, which is really cool. So we have Christmas parties with the owners and summer barbecues with the owners, stuff like that. But it's a really great place to work, and in all intents and purposes, like I'm really lucky to have a job and work here.
What would you say is the favorite part of your day or favorite part of your job?
Well, selfishly, I would say away game travel. So if we're flying on the charter with the team, which is really cool because you're not flying public for sure, commercial. My wife and I went to London when the team played there in 2019 against the Raiders. It's fun, like getting to see the new stadiums, exploring new cities. But as it relates to the business, I would say every day can be different. Every hour could be different just because of the variety of projects. So it could be a market research project 1 hour, it could be ticket pricing the next, it could be a sponsorship project the next. So I would say like I've been burnt out before, but I've never been bored before. So it's great just from that perspective, where it's all new and everything is really being implemented, because it's such a small family business with a massive revenue stream.
How many employees do the Bears have? And I know the sports side is a little different from the business side. Is that separated, or do you have like an idea of like how large the organization is with the?
Yeah, good question. If you're going to strip out like the coaches and the scouts, there's probably about 100 people on the business side, and that's anyone from events and activation. So like the people that are running the video board, or the people that are managing the maintenance of Soldier Field, or Hallis Hall, our practice facility, and like the field maintenance. So like all in, it's probably about 100 people. It's small. Like I came from Major League Baseball before this, from the league office. I mean, there's 1,000 people there to support the 30 clubs business. So it's much different, but it is very much a small business.
Yeah, it was a lot smaller than I anticipated you saying there. So thinking about Lafayette, did any experience at Lafayette put you on your path to your current position and what you're doing now?
Yeah, I had an interest in, I assume like most college students do. Like I had an interest in going into sports. I had no idea really what I wanted to do. I was adamant that I was going to be a GM, and then when you really start to think about the American Major 4 sports leagues, like there's not many GM jobs out there. But I think I worked on an independent study with Professor Brugink. He's in the economics department, and we worked on defining a star player in the NBA, and then what's their impact on team performance. So like a winning production function. I was able to leverage that into an internship with the 76ers in their front office, working on draft. But like when it came to actually getting a job after graduation, again, like going into the front office, there was maybe like 2 jobs for everyone in America to try and get with the Major 4 leagues. So I went into ticket sales and sort of worked my butt off, and eventually transitioned over to the NBA, and then to MLB, and then eventually over to the Bears. So I've covered off 3 of the 4 major leagues, but probably here for some time.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, you just mentioned baseball, basketball, football. What's been your favorite sports work within?
It's funny because I grew up a massive NBA fan, and I grew up a Giants fan when it came to football, and a Yankee fan in baseball. I would say a lot of the nuances of like team relationships when I was at the MLB league office, I think I could probably say this, but like the Red Sox were really nice people. They took me in. I consulted with them a lot from the business side. So I almost became a de facto Red Sox fan, which is, becoming a Lehigh fan, which would be unheard of. But the NFL, I think that just the game experience, how the Bears are perceived, candidly, sorry, Wataru, like as Chicago's team. And we certainly have the data to back that up. But it's been really fun to work in the NFL. It's just a different beast than other sports.
How was your time at Lafayette, or how did your time at Lafayette kind of mold your expertise and your ability to do your job?
It definitely helped instill work ethic. Like I had a 4.0 in college, like I'm sure in high school, like most Lafayette students did. But when I got to college, you can't really just skate by on not really doing a ton of work. So early on, really freshman year, I didn't do all that well. Sophomore year, once I started to get into some of the classes that I liked, I was a double major in econ and psych, and sort of married some of the quantitative analysis from psych and the business principles from econ, and married that into what I do today. So I'd say like all in, starting off on that foundation, that really helped form and mold me where I am today.
All right, I got to ask, were you involved in, or how much business effort was concentrated around Justin Fields in that pick? Oh no, we might have lost him. I hope he comes back, because I really want to hear the answer to that. All right, we lost you for a little bit just before you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Just before you went into your answer, we lost you for a second.
it was probably the best pick for the business side and the football side. The sentiment around the Bears, like before, was not great. You know, Andy Dalton was QB1 for us, and I think fans were expecting Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson. So expectations were set here. No offense to Andy Dalton, probably settled down here. But it's been great. Like our social media activity, retail sales, everything's been skyrocketing ever since. Guy hasn't even played it down yet. So like I'm a little skeptical just by nature, but it's been a tremendous impact just for the business side.
Got a good question in here. Does the new massive NFL TV deal take some of the pressure off of individual teams needing to generate revenue, though the salary cap will rise as well, of course?
I would say that. I mean, the NFL typically is a little bit further behind the other leagues from my experience, mostly like out of not needing to analyze data or not needing to have the Moneyball on the business side. The NFL TV contract is so massive for the owners that, I mean, if you lose $100,000 here when you could have made $200,000, it's, in all honesty, it's very small. So teams have started to scale up in terms of their analytics departments, where you'll see the average size on the business side is probably around 4 in the NFL now. But on like in the NBA, it's probably 8 or 9 on the business side, and baseball, it's somewhere in between. So it takes some of the pressure off, but I think what you'll see on the business side is everyone getting smarter. NFL is expanding into Europe from a business side. So we'll certainly need the TV money, but it'll help just make owners and teams more money.
Do you deal with anything in terms of Amazon getting its fingers in the pot with the huge Thursday deal as well?
Yeah, I mean, all the TV broadcast there's a broadcast committee that our owner is on, as well as some other committees, but it's helpful from NFL fans skew older, much like they do in MLB, NBA, and NHL skew a little bit younger, but it's part of the league initiative to certainly grow the diversity of fans and grow the avidity from a younger fan base.
The question we had here is concussion awareness. How has that affected the business side of football? Does it?
It doesn't, not nearly as many like as other external factors. Just from the football side, there's been good support from the NFLPA, where they've rolled out new helmets this past off season, that are widely supported by the players. There's a ton of performance data that will support the diminishment of concussions under these beta tests of helmets that have been used in the past. But like, it's not, as an external force, concussions will probably impact youth participation, which will further impact fandom down the road for the NFL. But candidly, we haven't seen that. We do a lot of longitudinal tracking of like youth fans nationally and within the DMA, and we haven't seen significant declines in youth participation at this point.
Excellent. Now, is Chicago going to have 2 world champions coming up pretty soon here? What do you think? I
feel like the right answer, is to be bold and say yes. Wataru, I feel like you were a little more like bullish and shy with your answer, so I'll say yes based on our defense, but I think the offense will come around.
Awesome. I have a couple of questions, so that brings us kind of to the end. Thank you so much, panelists. I really appreciate it. I have a couple of questions that I've kind of held on to for the next 15 minutes or so. We're going to do a little Q&A. So if you have lingering questions from any of the panelists, I offer that you put those in the chat. But Corey, I can start with you and we'll go around to our panelists there. Fan of the job or fan of sports?
Fan of the job, although if I went to go work for another team or another league, I don't know that I could root against the Bears. I'm a fan of the job.
All right. Greg, what do you think?
I gotta say fan of sports. It really comes sports first for me. I enjoy the job. I work with a great group of guys, but a question I get all the time is, I've been with the company 3 years now, has working in sports affected your ability to enjoy it, the way you watch it? And the answer is basically no. Like it's just, I'm still watching the games. I still get amped about them. I still very much have the fan experience outside work. And then, at work, it's just a little more work, that I certainly enjoy, but it's the game comes first for me.
It's funny, just to interject, like I can't watch the game without recognizing like signage or sponsors or suites or whatever. So like I'm totally the opposite.
No, I don't blame you. I mean, certainly with the NBA, it's I might have overstated. It's impossible for me at this point not to be like, I see a burst. I'm like, oh, there's a high acceleration. We'll see that. But I've been working in performance data for 3 years. I've been working in sports fandom for 31. So I've got some ways to catch up still.
Taru, what do you think?
I guess for me, it's kind of a sad answer, but I think it's both. So I love the analytics part. Like that's what I really wanted to do. But I'm also like, I played baseball my entire life. So it's like, and now that growing up, I was a New York Yankees fan, like Corey was. But I think once you become part of the organization, it's like friends versus family thing. And now they're family to me. Like if someone throws a ball at you, I take it personal too. It's like, and then it's like, if it's like a close game in bottom eighth, I'm just pacing back and forth in my room or at the ballpark too. So, so there's that intensity and the competitiveness that like drives me. But at the same time, I'm looking like all these things and like, I was like, oh, maybe we can do a little bit better in terms of like this thing. And maybe we can start looking into some of these data aspects. So it's like, it both happens at the same time. So it's been a really fun ride for me.
Maybe we can go back around the horn. Wataru, I'll start with you. How respected are the numbers versus kind of some more traditional? I know, Corey, you're going to have a different little take on this as well, but like how respected are those numbers in the organization versus sort of the maybe, I would say traditional methods or, in your sense, traditional scouting or the eye test or things like that?
So I think back in when the Moneyball movie came out, I think there was a lot of that, like the traditional scouting versus like numbers. But like right now, it's all about both, like doing a collaborative effort. Like no team cannot win with one or the other. Like you have to have both, and that like there's just looking at numbers, you can't really tell some things. But like and then at the same time, you can't just be looking at a player and be like that guy's good. So that collaborative effort is what makes other team and what makes every team, I guess, a better team now. So there's not really that, I guess the discord is what I was saying. Yeah.
Greg, what do you think? How respected are your numbers?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting dynamic in kind of my branch, because on the one hand, there's almost an additional layer of challenge because we're almost one layer removed from the team, in the sense that we're dealing mostly with strength coaches and trainers and performance guys for the staff. So there's a whole nother kind of layer there where they have to translate this to the coaches. There's a whole dynamic of trying to track things as technically and sophisticatedly as possible, but also finding a way to explain that in a way that coaches can understand it and use it, because they're not exercise scientists, right? They've never heard of mechanical load and things like that. So we're almost farther on the perimeter in that sense. But then I also think there's not that juxtaposition between old school, new school with what I do necessarily. There's not really like, a scout who would contrast and be like, I think he runs well, right? Like no one's really in disagreement about like the philosophy of like, yeah, let's keep the players healthy. When it comes to like, if you want to like sit guys out and stuff like those are much more complicated decisions, and that's where it could, but I think in general, everyone's behind the spirit of what we're doing, because it's a very kind of obvious conclusion to just keep players healthy. But then just like the distance travel to get, my work to the performance guys translated the right way to the teams to have an effect, that's a pretty long path. So that is a challenge for sure.
And it's slightly different for you, Corey, I know, but like when you can make some money or save some dollars here and there, like how much is that appreciated within the organization?
Yeah, it's been sort of like a maturation process for us, because when I started 5 years ago with the Bears, we didn't have an analytics department. Most NFL teams didn't, and a couple still don't. So there was a lot of uphill battles and a lot of like, here's what the numbers say, here's what the model is, versus like, our director of ticketing, who's been in his role for 20 years, gut feel. We've been much better about really, I don't want to call it like a monopoly of decisions, but leveraging the data to really make decisions, whether it's on sponsorship or TV deals or radio rights or ticketing. So we are definitely leaning much more heavy on the analytics side.
Awesome. What can the panel tell us about graduate school? Worthwhile investment, pursuing a career in sports, for those advice for current students? Greg. Corey.
I'll jump in. So I had been admitted to graduate school twice in the 12 years since I have graduated Lafayette, and both times, I think for good reason, ultimately started and then stopped, but I have started again, mostly from a business perspective and interest in learning. So I'm getting my master's currently in management and strategy. So not necessarily related to the day-to-day, but more like leadership growth.
Yeah, I think, for me, a graduate program was necessary just to kind of perfect my field of expertise in terms of statistics. I think there's nothing special about sports there, in the sense that if you want to do stuff with statistics and analytics, you should know your stuff and you have to do it well. I think you can cover that stuff at the undergraduate level, and if you are prepared and able to do that, your courses at Lafayette can absolutely have you that well prepared. I think this might sound obvious, but in terms of like what can you do specifically for sports, in my experience, it's just anything. In my experience, sports, it's very like the people are really looking for sports experience, and I know that's hard, because how do you get the classic question, right? How do you get experience when you don't have any? But I just feel like in this industry more than any other, there's almost a feel that people want you to prove that you really want to do sports, and it's like, well, everyone wants. So it just anything you can do with sports, is I think highly recommended. And I include in that, self-contained projects and projects in your own time. I know I've chatted with Wataru some, and I know how interested he was in this stuff from a young age, and pursuing some really cool projects he told me about. And even me, when I was going through my master's, not really sure which direction I would go to, I would just start fooling around with some data on my computer, right? Some NBA box score data. And it wasn't very glamorous or scientific, but that turned into something I could put on my resume, right? And I could talk to somebody for 10 minutes about this ANOVA project I did on, NBA fan capacity that, sounded probably a lot cooler than it was, but it showed my interest. And I just think people are really focused on that in this industry. I've gotten that sense personally.
Yeah, and I think you guys brought up like really good points. I think I agree with the fact that like in terms of like getting into sports, it's like everyone's a sports fan, and like you might be, and for me, I had a background in math, but like it's really hard to show that you can do sports with math, or you can combine those things together. And so for me, I did, so as Greg mentioned, I did I did a research project for fun in terms of baseball, and then presented at, so there's a couple like baseball analytics conferences, and I presented at the Sabre seminar in Boston in 2019. And that was like the most important thing that helped me in terms of getting to this job. So I think it's the educational background is important, but more importantly, it's the passion, and also being able to show that like you can do sports combined with your like what you study it's what I would say.
Yeah, see, that is, you made a good point there, separating the fandom from your, being able to separate fandom from actually like wanting to pursue this as a career.
Yes. Yeah.
It's pretty important.
if I could just underscore that, like, I think we're all sports fans. The number of like resumes or cover letters that I see that says like I'm a huge Bears fan, it's almost like it gets thrown out the window right away. Like I candidly, like Greg, I totally get what you're saying. When I was working my way up, or still am, sports is incestual, like where you have to have experience. I think we're getting a little bit away from that. So like to me, if you have the technical expertise to do something, whether you come from healthcare or financial services, like anyone can do it. I'd rather teach them how to make it sports specific rather than teach a sports fan how to build a regression.
Oh,
Definitely.
Yeah.
Agree with that.
Yeah.
I know all three of our panelists tonight are men. Opportunities for women in the jobs. I think this will be our last kind of question before we look to wrap up tonight.
Yes, I have a small team right now, but we're hiring for 2 more. We have a female on my team now who manages the research side of things. And I can tell you my counterparts, there's not many females, but certainly some female leaders in terms of like directors of business analytics or manager of analytics or VPs of analytics. My boss is a female. She's our CFO. She's probably one of 3 or 4 CFOs that are females in sports. And certainly you see a lot more of like females coming to bat, where just today, the Houston Rockets announced their team president of business, Gretchen Shear, is a female. So I think it's starting to become more and more prominent.
Yeah, I'll echo what Corey said. I would say we've seen literally in the last 6 months to 1 year, just more interest coming in from female candidates, which is exciting. We, in our small group here, we've been male dominated for a while. And in the last 6 months, we've brought on, I think, three new female employees, which is definitely exciting. And it's just one of the kind of those things that's moving together, right? As we're able to hire more, we're getting more interest at the same time. And yeah, certainly we just hired a former Division I college basketball player on the female side. So, we're thrilled to have that experience. That's exactly the kind of person we want, managing projects and someone who knows how to work with some tech and talk to some teams. So.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of baseball, like for starting this season, Kim Ang is the general manager of the Miami Marlins, which is, I think she's the first woman to be the general manager of a major sports team. And for the White Sox, it's relatively male dominated. But in terms of one of my coworkers is her name is Emily. She's a huge mentor to me. She's worked for the Tigers and also the Nationals, I believe. So she's well connected. She's like one of the more prominent analysts in the industry. So there is, but it's really like as you guys all know, it's pretty hard to like get into that industry, especially when it's like a male dominated industry. But I think the industry as a whole is moving towards more inclusive, and hopefully we'll see more and more in the future.
Ian, could I jump in and just make a comment, if you don't mind? And I'm not known to most of the people on this line. I come from the soccer side. I worked for the San Jose Earthquakes and was a general manager there, and we had some success. But I actually met my wife through soccer. She's in MLS. She's been there for 22 years. She's president and chief operating officer, and she fights really hard to try to advance women in this industry, which is such an important initiative. And I can't recount how many conversations we have, over the dinner table about how hard it is to get involved in the sport. So you guys mentioned how hard it is to get in the sport in general, get a foot in the door and advance a career. For women, it's that much harder, but getting better. There's a lot of work to do, but I think it's getting better for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. And hey, huge thanks as I'm looking at the clock here. Huge thanks to Wataru, Greg, Corey for joining me on this panel tonight. Your insights and your presentations were fantastic. And, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who joined us tonight in the Lafayette community who's here to support, these spotlight talks, these ConnectEd talks. We really appreciate it and keeping these things going. I do want to let you know, June 7th through the 13th, the Office of Alumni Relations is hosting a virtual reunion with over 30 virtual programs. And you can check out Leopard Link for the full schedule if you're interested in attending or looking at any of those. But I appreciate everything that you guys have said tonight, and thank you for joining us. And thank you, Lafayette. I hope you enjoyed our presentation tonight. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Here.
Thank you.